This video is all about consciousness. Specifically, we're going to explore in some detail the first stage of the human journey through consciousness. My name is Brent Phillips. I am the founder and creator of the Awakening Dynamic System of Energy Healing and Higher Consciousness. And this is video number 4 of 9 in our series on consciousness. Big picture, this series is all about mapping out for you what is the journey of human consciousness? How does it work? What are the stages? What are the differences? How do I know how to move through it more easily? This video, number 4, is all about the first stage of consciousness, which on the Hawkins scale is 0 to 199. And so the name for this stage is the victim. And I'm going to talk a lot more about how victim consciousness works, as well as how to get yourself and others out of it. And so the defining characteristic of victim consciousness is this: that you do not feel that you have the power or ability within you to determine what happens in your life. It's them. It's outside of you. It's the government. It's the weather. It's the Illuminati. It's your wife, your parents, anything, right? That's the hallmark of victim consciousness. And so as a victim, people think that what they do doesn't really matter because it's not up to them. And so those in victim consciousness are usually characterized by a desire primarily for instant gratification. Why? They're not thinking long term. They're thinking, what can I do to get what I want right now and don't worry about the rest, right? I'll point out, from the outside that may look like presence, it's really not. It is subtly different. And so another thing I want to emphasize right now, to be 100% crystal clear: if you are watching this video and taking it seriously, there is no chance that you are a victim. 0. Victims online are looking for what they call clickbait, right? Instant gratification. People being hit in the head, right? Or, some scam on, how to make money or have more sex or something, right? Something that's all about the instant gratification. Something that really riles you up, makes you angry, makes you sad, makes you proud, right? That's not wrong or bad. Just I want to emphasize, if you're watching this and taking it seriously, there is no chance that you are a victim. However, you will at times in your life experience residue of the victim vibration. I talked about this a lot more in the last video, number 3 in our series, but just realize all these things within the whole scale tend to be part of everyone's life. But your home base is not a victim. Crystal clear, right? Other thing you need to know is victims are not worse. You are not better than them because you're a victor or a vehicle. You are simply different. One of my favorite teachings from my late mentor, Carl, was that the human journey of consciousness parallels the journey of the body. And so, in terms of our life physical experience as humans, the victim stage is childhood. Because let's think about it. When we are born as tiny little babies, we are victims. We can't feed ourselves. Heck, most of us can't even lift our heads or sit up when we're born. We are completely dependent on things outside of us for our very survival. We have to be fed. We have to be clothed. We have to be sheltered. We have to be loved. A baby is not capable of doing those things for him or herself, period. So notice there's nothing wrong with being a baby. Babies are amazing. They're so full of love. Oh my gosh. The only time in my life I have been beamed with energy and higher consciousness more powerfully than my late mentor could was the very first day my son was born. Wow. But he lost it by his second day on the planet. So I want to emphasize, being a victim is not wrong or bad. You're not better than them. We're just different. Babies are wonderful. Children are wonderful in a lot of ways. But they can't do things adults can do. That's all. So love and cherish the victims around you. They matter just as much as those of us of what we would call higher consciousness. In the same way that children matter just as much as adults. At least I feel so. Does that make sense? Hope that makes sense. And so the journey of emotions through the victim, I'm going to throw up a little graphic here, and it goes something like this. Shame is the lowest vibration. That leads to guilt, a little better than shame, still sucks, but better. Then to apathy, then to fear, then to desire, then to anger, and then to pride. Pride is the top end of the victim range. I want to point out that it's important we don't try to skip steps. You can't take someone whose home base is guilt and immediately force them into pride. It does not work. In the same way, you can't take a 1-year-old and have them turn into a teenager a year later. That's ridiculous, right? It does not work that way. The only way the human body grows is 1 year at a time. Year 0, year 1, year 2, so on until you die, right? Same thing with consciousness. You can't skip steps. You can try. I just think you'll find it doesn't work. And heck, you're welcome to try. And just this is my caution, right? It works best if you move people naturally according to this progression. And again, this is based on the Hawkins scale, which I think is a wonderful tool to understand these levels of consciousness. Here's another really important thing. Wherever you're at on the scale, the higher vibrations will always feel better. That's how it works. So if you're mired in shame, guilt actually feels better. Why? With shame, you think you're irrelevant, you're unimportant, you don't matter at all. It's the denial of self and the denial of the divine. That's why it's the lowest. But again, it's not wrong. Just like it's not wrong to be a newborn. It's just part of the process, right? Guilt actually feels better than shame. If you feel guilty, it's usually because you feel you did something wrong. But clearly you must have some power if you did something wrong that created a negative effect. Because if you had no power at all, if you were totally irrelevant, you couldn't do anything that would create guilt. Now, could you? Fascinating, right? Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail like that with every single emotion here, but notice that's how it works. And so anger feels better than fear. Absolutely. So that's why if you're working with people, maybe you're a professional like me, maybe you're some kind of counselor or coach or a doctor, a nurse, something like that, or a lawyer or a plumber, doesn't matter, or a parent, or just trying to help out your friends. Try to understand where they're at. And if you can move them up just one step, it'll feel amazing. They'll be so happy. And every step feels so much better than the last. That's, I think, really key here. So let's share a little bit about how to recognize the victims. And so one place you can find victims, in my experience, is daytime TV. They're not all victims, but people that make daytime TV talk shows have found that you bring in people that are really kind of broken and dysfunctional, and many people love it. It's kind of sad. But many people love it if they're in the lower vibrations, because seeing someone that's more messed up than them makes them feel better about themselves. And so I remember watching some daytime TV show years ago. It was just on when I was having lunch or something, right? And they had some kid who I think was 19 years old. He'd already been to prison 3 times. He had lost his driver's license 6 times. And he had children with 4 different women. He couldn't hold down a job. He was a drinker. He used drugs, on and on, right? The reason they put on people like that is if you are in the audience and you're of a lower consciousness, that will make you feel better. I think it's kind of sad. I just felt really bad for the kid. I really hoped he could find what he needed to move forward in his life, because that's a horrible place to be. Another place where I have found a lot of victims, go to a Social Security office. Now, I'm not against it. These are not inherently horrible people. I mean, maybe some of them are, right? That's true of any group of people. But there was a time in my life, the only thing that kept me from being homeless was receiving Social Security disability. So that's why, again, it's not a wrong or bad thing. But you go to one of those places, which I spent too much time in during my dark years. People have this attitude that, oh God, someone has to do this all for me. I can't do it for myself. It's all up to the government. It's all up to my doctor, right? They're not all like that. But it's that kind of energy of what I do doesn't matter. One of the ways you can discover a victim, though it's an expensive way, is give them a bunch of money and see what happens. It's pretty simple. You give a bunch of money to a victim, they'll tend to blow it on instant gratification. Pretty simple, right? And we'll talk more about this in the later stages. You give it to a victor, they'll blow a little bit of it, save, invest the rest, think long term, right? The vehicle likely may take care of their immediate needs and will try to do something for others with a lot of the rest in some way, shape, or form. And this is so interesting because I remember back, I think it was 2007-ish, something like that. There was this thing they did on Oprah's show where they found two men that seemed like good candidates for getting their life together, but they were homeless. In other words, they wanted people that didn't have a severe mental illness, that weren't addicted to drugs, nothing like that, right? That's what I meant by good candidates to get their life together. And Oprah gave them both $90,000. Did they turn their life around and get a place and a job and a car? No, they blew the money. One of them spent money and then used the things he bought as collateral to borrow more money and ended up declaring bankruptcy. And again, I don't mean to mock these men. They're important too. In the same way, I wouldn't give a 2-year-old $90,000. Why? Even if the 2-year-old understood the money, he'd use it to buy candy or games or something, right? We used to joke that one of my cats tried to kill me once by tripping me on the stairs, thinking if they could get my life insurance money, they could buy so many cat treats it could fill our home, right? Again, not blaming them, but that's just where they're at. That's how it works when you're trapped in victim consciousness. So how do we move out of this? Well, it's pretty simple. You want to understand where someone's at and help them move through every stage of the journey. Ultimately, victims escape through pride. Pride is the highest level of victim consciousness. And when you can get someone to pride, then they're ready to graduate to become a victor. So how do we do that? Lots of ways. Education, self-empowerment, Oprah's show, right? Dr. Phil and Tough Love, things like that. I think one of the greatest institutions that we've seen that's really good at turning victims into victors is the United States Marine Corps. Why? They're all about pride. And it can be wonderful if it's bringing you up. It can also be awful if it's bringing you down. And I saw this happen with my own eyes. One of my best friends growing up, his name was Mike. And we were good friends, grammar school, and so on. When we were in high school, things happened in his life. Crap hit the fan, right? He started hanging out with the wrong people, using drugs, committing minor crimes, things like that. He was on the wrong track. And Mike was smart enough to realize this. So he dropped out of school to get away from his destructive friends, got his GED, and joined the Marine Corps. And I'll never forget that he joined the Marines maybe 3 months before I left for MIT. And I didn't really talk to him when he was in boot camp. He was pretty busy, right? And I remember that I was home on my first winter break, my freshman year at MIT, and the doorbell rang at like 10 in the morning. And I looked through the little peephole, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Mike. But he was standing up ramrod straight, wearing his uniform, and had this beautiful woman on his arm. And I opened the door. I'm like, Mike, whoa. And he smiled and said, hello. I wanted to come by and catch up and introduce you to my wife. And so it's amazing to me that Mike transformed and matured and grew more in the, 12 weeks or so that he was gone at boot camp than he did in the 12 years I had known him. It worked for him. I haven't kept touch with him since then. Mike, if you're out there watching this video, look me up. Be awesome to connect again. But last I checked, he was thriving. He was married. He had a career. He enjoyed being in the Marine Corps. It really worked for him. And of course, it's not the solution for everybody. That's just an example. That's the way we turn victims into victors. Guide them up in their journey, bring them to pride. That does the trick. And so let me just take a moment to ask for your comments and questions. If you have questions, comments about this victim stuff, maybe how do I help someone, please put it in below. My goal is to personally answer every single comment on all my videos. And while you're down there, make sure you hit like, make sure you hit subscribe. That would be awesome. You hit subscribe, you click the little bell. YouTube will give you notifications when I post brand new videos. Awesome, awesome. So, a couple more things I want to say about victims. First is, again, they're not worse than us. Don't put them in a leadership position, right? Just realize they're at a different stage of the journey. When my son was 4 years old, oh my gosh, he was so amazing. He loved his mommy and daddy so much. He wanted to do everything with us. I remember one time, I'm heading out the door, I grab my keys. I'm like, hey, honey, I'm going to the DMV, right? Department of Motor Vehicles. My son, 4 years old, comes running out, Daddy, I want to go to the DMV with you. I want to go. And we laughed. Why? No one wants to go to the DMV, right? But 4-year-olds can be like that. But he also loved racing games. We'd go to Dave & Buster's. He loved racing the cars and the boats. He loved all that. He always wanted to drive the family car. I said, no. It's not that I didn't love him, but please don't let a 4-year-old drive a full-size car on public roads. No. That's all I'm saying about victims. Many of us have victims as family, as friends, as co-workers. It's okay. Just understand where they're at. Don't give them more power than they're ready for, just like anybody. But they deserve just as much love and respect as anybody else. And so I mentioned the boot camp story with Mike partly because Earth is boot camp, people, in case you didn't know. That I'm going to go a little metaphysical here. So if you're more skeptical, just kind of dipping your toe into the New Age water, maybe click next, go to my next video, because this is a little out there, a little warning. It is my understanding, based on channels and intuition, the Akashic Records, all this work I've done, that Earth is unique in our galaxy, in that it is the one planet where you can make a huge jump in consciousness in one lifetime. And how does that work? Well, it's pretty simple. When we come to Earth, we have a thick veil between us and the higher dimensions. That's why it seems like we're born and just life happens to us. That's not actually what's going on. But we forget who we are, where we're from. We forget that we have all this love and support, guides, guardians, and so on the other side. We veil ourselves from that, and we think we're a body, a man, a woman, whatever, right? That's because life is a boot camp on Earth. And that's why I mentioned Mike's story. And also because I'd love to connect with Mike. I have just no idea where you are, right? That'd be awesome. Earth is boot camp. And if you've known anyone that went to boot camp, it's not easy. It's really difficult. They wake you up at 5 a.m. They shave your hair. They make you run 3 miles, do 1,000 push-ups. No one cares what you want or what you think, right? Boot camp is tough. Tough mentally, tough physically, tough emotionally. But you can take someone who's maybe kind of a loser and turn them into a soldier. Turn them into a Marine, something to really be proud of. That's why I love Mike's story. He was going down the wrong track. An amazing guy, super smart, big heart, great person. And he realized this isn't going to serve me. And boot camp was brutal, but he became a new man. I emphasize he transformed and grew more in the 12 weeks he was in boot camp than in the 12 years I knew him. That's what Earth is, people. Earth is boot camp. It's brutal. It's hard physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. It can be awful. Not that there's bad things about it. Mike also said there were things he loved about boot camp: the camaraderie, the sense of purpose, giving meaning to his life, believing in himself. So it's not all bad, but it's really difficult. Why? The only way you can make a lot of change in a short time is doing something really hard. Staying in your comfort zone, doing what's easy for you, will not cause you to grow. It's not wrong or bad. It just doesn't cause growth. Discomfort, challenge, struggle, these tend to be the inputs that produce the most growth. And I think a happy life is about balancing the two. Be in your comfort zone some of the time, relax, enjoy, be present, that's great. But also sometimes challenge yourself. Get out of your comfort zone. Face your struggles, face your issues. Over the long run, the healthy balance of both creates the best life. So I hope you found this useful, entertaining, informative. That's all I got to say for right now about victim consciousness. In the next video, number 5 in the series, we're going to move up the scale and talk about the victor. Until then, please take care and namaste.